Hello, everyone. It's lovely to be here. Celia, thank you so much for inviting us. We are running the Institute of Psychedelic Therapy. We run a professional community of therapists, health practitioners, and we try to bring a space where collaboration can flourish, people can get to know each other, and we bring some thoughtfulness and energy in this work. And we also run a 2-year psychedelic-assisted therapy program. We're on the second cohort, and we work with really, really wonderful practitioners that are taking time to really reflect on how to do this work in a way that's safe and skillful. And we're on this panel today to talk about scaling. And what we want to bring in the conversation is the importance of maintaining the integrity of the containers we work with. Because when we talk about scaling, we usually think about cost, about resource allocation. But what we care about is having optimum containers. And we will talk about dyadic co-therapy teams. So dyadic co-therapy teams are maybe working with individuals, they may be working with groups, but you may work in a bigger co-facilitation team. And there too, many of the principles we will discuss apply. So let's start with some moments of leaning into the deep that we will all recognize one way or another. So imagine a person lying down in a quiet room, eyes covered, music swelling, and a medicine settling into their body. And the breath deepens, the edges of time start to blur, and they begin to feel something very old stirring within themselves. It may be grief, it may be wonder, or it may be a memory that they didn't know they still carried within their body. And the moments pass, and now suddenly they're not in the room with you anymore. They're in the forest of their childhood, or they're floating in the vast, dark sea of their psyche, or they're kneeling in the edge of a void that's threatening to swallow them whole. And that's where you, as a facilitator, comes in, not as an expert with all the answers, but as a steady, compassionate witness that accompanies them as they find their own way home. Psychedelic therapy takes people into profoundly open and vulnerable states. People regress, they go into expanded states, symbolic states, very raw places. And when someone steps into that kind of inner wilderness with the intention of healing, we think that they shouldn't really go alone. In great myths of transformation, the myth always tells us that the journeyer is supported by a companion, a guardian, a witness, a guide. Deep journeys have their allies, one way or another. Clients step into a very liminal territory, the realm of the unconscious, the sacred, the archetypal, the mythic dimensions of their psyche. And these are not ordinary experiences. These are initiations that come quite suddenly. Sometimes people navigate the underworld of trauma, the desert of grief, the thresholds of long-buried memories. They go up the mountain paths of revelation. And what makes it safe to cross these thresholds, to navigate these journeys, isn't the medicine alone, it's the presence of a safe other. Because in the work we do, we're not really offering techniques. We're offering presence, we're offering relationship, we're offering containment. We offer qualities that help people touch the untouchable. What we need is a relational field of containment that is strong enough to hold what emerges when the ego dissolves for the person and things are becoming disorienting. And when we work in sub-steps, if we want to do it skillfully and if we want to do it safely, it requires more than one set of hands. Two people in the room support the opening and the deepening of the process. Two pairs of safe hands support people surrender into the process. So we think of the co-therapist pair as an archetypal structure in the space. And there's 4 archetypal frames we want to bring while we discuss of co-therapy work. Firstly, they stand for the inner masculine and the inner feminine, and that is regardless of gender. We're talking about 2 presences that allow the psyche to explore polarities, the nurturing and the challenging, containment and confrontation, structure and flow. 2 co-therapists can hold a polarity into the room, and the client can safely navigate from one end to the other. The mother and the father, again, regardless of gender, these are archetypal, developmental, and relational blueprints we all carry deep within the foundations of our being. And they inform how we relate to our inner and outer worlds. And the 2 co-therapists, the co-therapy dyad, holds the archetypal developmental blueprint in the space. The gatekeepers of the threshold, like Hermes and Hecate, they hold space at the liminal edges of the known and the unknown. And lastly, the divine witnesses. When 2 therapists attend to a client's pain or joy or emergence, the psyche receives a validation and a confirmation. It receives an encouragement. It feels that this happened, I was seen, I'm real, I'm okay, I can let go, maybe I can go a bit deeper. And we call them divine witnesses because these witnesses don't just capture bare facts. They stand to witness the sacred journey of a soul in process. And in the mythic journeys, there's always a moment of trial. There's a moment where something sacred is nearly lost. And in therapy, these moments often arrive suddenly. They arrive without a warning. They can blindside us, and they require a skillful co-therapy team that know how to navigate between them the demands of the moment. A client begins reliving early trauma. One therapist uses touch to ground the body, the other breathes with the soul. A client dissociates. One therapist stays in physical contact, the other calls them back through rhythm, tone, and presence. A powerful projection lands on one therapist. It could be the shadow, it could be the lost parent, the abuser, the beloved. The other therapist holds the field in a steady and non-reactive way, so the process doesn't collapse. It gets supported and midwifed through. These are very sharp edges in the work, and they require a structure that's strong enough to let the client fall apart and reform in their own way, in their own pace, in their own time. After the session ends, the 2 therapists become mirrors of meaning. They help the client weave and honor what emerged into memory. This is what you faced, this is what you survived, this is what was revealed.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Tim. Thanks for joining us. I want to start off by talking a bit about projection, because so much of our lived experience is shaped by projection, which is our unconscious tendency to view the present through the lens of the past. So we carry expectations of how we're going to be met, and we do this all the time, how we'll be loved, how we'll be hurt. And in expanded states, this process of projection is really amplified, and this often helpfully exposes and highlights our deepest wounds, those parts of us that hurt so much and that yearn for healing. But these places are in the unconscious, beyond conscious memory, and often really hidden behind robust defense systems, so they're hidden and difficult to work with. So the gift of psychedelic-assisted therapy, of course, is that these hidden wounds become more available, with the possibility of healing if the work goes well, but also of re-traumatization if it doesn't go so well. And the projective field that we work with is really rich in information if we know how to use it, but it's mysterious, it's subtle, powerful, complex, and often totally beyond words. So as co-therapists, our task is really to hold space in a way that allows these projections to emerge as fully as they need to, and with all their emotional and somatic edges. To offer a container that honors the messiness, where people can be met, really truly and deeply met in their most vulnerable spaces. And we really think this is at the heart of the work. And in the more complex pieces of this work, the co-therapy dyad offers some really important advantages, providing a more complete projective screen, allowing a broader bandwidth of projections to surface and be held, and offering a safer container for the expression and containment of these projections, and offering a deeper, more nuanced integration. And the role of the co-therapist, of course, evolves through the preparation, the medicine journey, and the integration. And each of those phases calls upon different aspects of the co-therapist's presence. And the participant's relationship, we could call it transference, to each therapist also changes throughout the process. So, for example, one co-therapist might engage the more adult part of a participant, while the other co-therapist becomes the relational object for younger parts of the participant to emerge, engage, and be held. And this flexibility can provide a kind of seedbed where previously unmet parts of the self can become available to be incorporated into a larger, hopefully more functional personality structure. At the deepest levels of the work, a different kind of space opens up, one that goes beyond language, beyond ego structures, and into what we might call a shared field of consciousness. And this is where the boundaries between the therapist and the participants, and between the co-therapists as well, begin to blur. And we move from an individual I and you into something closer to a we, what Winnicott called at-one-ment. And in this state, we seem to enter a wordless reverie space, a zone of attunement where mind and body and heart resonate in a different way, a bit like the mother-infant bond, where consciousness is shared and undifferentiated. And in this merging, we often come into contact with pre-verbal and transpersonal material, early psychic wounds and unmet needs that you can't get to grips with through more cognitive methods. And this has powerful consequences. It stirs the deep body memory, touching the core of our formative experiences, where experience is stored not as thought, but as something that's deeply felt and physical and visceral. And for the co-therapist, this space is like entering a deep lake, and we ourselves emerge changed from it. We carry something of the participant with us, maybe a mood or a body feeling, sometimes a vision, even a smell. Sometimes it's really subtle and you have to gently tune into it. Sometimes it's really powerful and can feel quite overwhelming. But what we feel as co-therapists when we emerge from this state is really rich in nutrients for the healing journey and needs to be integrated. So after a held psychedelic session, it really takes time for any clarity to emerge from this merged liminal space. And this is where the co-therapy relationship really comes into its own. And it's important to take time and move slowly. And we think that the two co-therapists taking a walk in nature is a really good way to start this process of allowing some reverie, a feeling into what's coming up. And you might notice a mood, maybe joy or a breakthrough mood, or a heaviness, a confusion, a sadness, or maybe even a sense of futility. You might feel something in your body, maybe feeling energized or exhausted or foggy or drugged. Or you might feel some feelings towards the participant that surprise you, whether profound love or unexpected critical feelings or judgment. But whatever arises is really important. It's all part of a field that needs to be integrated. And often the start of a conversation between the co-therapist begins with the obvious reflections, but then as the space deepens, the subtleties start to emerge. And sometimes each co-therapist might have seen things very differently, and that contrast is really useful for integration. And we often call this process triangulation, where by bringing your different impressions, from thoughts or emotions or feelings in your body, you create a much more complex understanding of your client's internal process. And we feel that the depth of this understanding is a really important component of the healing process. And it's as though we as co-therapists are metabolizing something of that at-one-ment space. So the Jungian analyst Margot Kuttner, who we think a lot of in the first generation of LSD therapy, used to talk about indigestible lumps of psychic experience. So we feel that the co-therapy reverie space after a session is essential for that subtle, complex, multi-layered process that we might call digestion. So saying something about counter-transference, and in co-therapy it's really common for early relational dynamics of the participant to become powerfully activated within the therapeutic field. And when these dynamics begin to play out between the co-therapists themselves, we call that counter-transference, a counter-transference reenactment. So to give you a short vignette, consider a client whose early life was shaped by the illness of her mother. The mother was often unavailable and felt burdened by guilt. The father tried to cope but was overwhelmed by the demands. The parental relationship broke down. The child stayed with grandparents who found her difficult to manage, reinforcing her sense that she was too much and nobody wanted her. So fast forward 40 years and she enters a psychedelic assisted therapy program, and I'm going to outline two different treatment scenarios. So in the first scenario, the two co-therapists come from different clinical backgrounds, different perspectives. One was new to psychedelic therapy, and there were some issues around power and hierarchy. During the first dosing session, the participant got in touch with some really difficult feelings and felt unsafe, felt too much. It was really difficult. And one co-therapist insisted on the use of rescue medication to keep her safe. The other felt that the session needed to unfold naturally and was really distressed that they couldn't meet the participants' needs in a unified way. And the organizational structure, unconsciously acting in that grandparent role, then decided that she was too complex and risky to continue in the trial, so her treatment finished. The co-therapists couldn't reconcile their differences and decided they couldn't work together. So this was a really bad outcome and reinforced the participant's sense that she was too broken, too difficult, and things would never change. So a real kind of missed opportunity for healing. In the second possible scenario, the co-therapists had taken a careful history during preparation. So they were attuned not only to her early attachment wounds, but also had some ideas as to what might arise in the counter-transference. And in the preparation sessions, they took a great deal of care to rehearse for ways in which she might be supported if needed. So when distress surfaced in the first session, the co-therapists were really able to tolerate the intensity, support her, allow the process to unfold, find ways to be with her in a really difficult, messy situation until she began to feel safe. It was difficult, but they made it. And in the walk in the park afterwards, they noticed that one of them had been carrying feelings of irritation and overwhelm, while the other had feelings of guilt and inadequacy, which kind of mirrored the feelings that had been prominent with her parents in her early environment. But this time, crucially, these dynamics were named, they were processed and digested between the two co-therapists. So by the time the second session arrived, the three of them felt they had a really solid platform from which they could go deeper, keep her safer, and support her more fully. So in this way, you're really building a container that allows the participants' process to be held with greater compassion and coherence, so that she began to feel that her most vulnerable, authentic self was really beginning to be seen and understood, and something long buried was finally being expressed.
So no one really says this when you start working in an ecotherapy team. But when you work in an ecotherapy team, it's not just about being present in the same room at the same time with a colleague. This is not really what it's about. It's about learning how to breathe together, how to track the field together, and how to hold a shared intention with attuned presence. And that doesn't happen at once. That doesn't just automatically appear. That evolves over time. It's a relationship in its own right. It's a relationship that has its own rhythm, its own seasons. It doesn't arrive fully formed. It unfolds slowly, session by session. So in the beginning, most co-therapy pairs start in what we might call the mirroring and managing phase. So in the beginning, it's a little bit like a first dance. You have two practitioners, they sit in a room together, they're both well-trained, they're both very competent, and yet they're quietly wondering, should I speak now? Should I step back? Did they notice what I just missed? So it's kind of careful at first. It's a little bit awkward. You watch each other, you manage the space, sometimes you speak in parallel. It's like learning and dance with someone new. There's a little bit of stepping on toes. And that's okay, that's the beginning. There's awkwardness, but there's also discovery. But the energy you use to manage being with each other is being used from the energy you have for attending to the client or the participant. And over time, if the pair is supported through shared reflection, through supervision, through trust building, they begin to enter what we might call the co-regulation and coherence phase. So over time, something softens a little bit. You start to feel each other's presence in the room a little bit more deeply. It's not as a colleague, but as a trusted nervous system you can lean into. Maybe one day the client begins to cry, and without needing to glance at each other, one leans in and the other leans back. It's not spoken, it's felt. You're becoming a little bit more familiar, more known. So you're moving from managing the session to co-holding it. And there's a little bit more ease, the silences are shared, decisions are not always discussed, but they're understood. And you begin to develop a kind of shared language, a shared intuition, a field between you that responds to the client in a way that not one of you could do. The co-therapists begin to function as a unified relational field, not just two people. And then, as time, experience, and shared vulnerability increase, something emerges. That is the third stage, which we might call the symbolic or the synergistic stage. The difference between the previous stage and this one is that in the coherent stage, you have a team that's functioning well. In the synergistic phase, you have a team that has become a living vessel for transformation. If the partnership is tended, if there's honesty, if there's repair when needed, the relationship ripens. Thank you. And the client can feel that. They feel the trust, they feel the respect, they feel the way you attune to each other as much as you attune to them. They see the way you sit in the unknown together, and they have a living experience of a secure relationship. They're seen from two angles, held by two hearts and held in two minds. And it becomes more than a therapeutic model. The client gets the message, you're not too much, you don't have to do this alone. We've got each other's backs and we've got your back. So the dyad isn't just holding the work here, the dyad is this work. And in this phase, there's more growth possibility for participants and co-therapists. Everyone participates in a healing field and no one lives the same.
Yeah, we wanted to say something now about preparation, about how we enter the space in a ritual way. And in the 2-year therapist training that we offer, we have a number of retreats, including working with psilocybin truffles in the Netherlands. And the day before we start the psilocybin retreat, the two of us sit by the sea with a bag of psilocybin truffles, and we go through the group, one by one, who we know really well by that stage, saying each group member's name. We speak their names for waves, and just hold that person in heart and mind for a while. And it is a while, and this takes time. And then we speak to each other about anything that comes up in that space. And sometimes something new emerges, perhaps there's a reframing or a new understanding. But more often, we don't really say very much. It's just a deepening of connection, a sense of love and care as we tune into each person, noticing where the energy flows freely and maybe sometimes where it doesn't, where it might feel blocked, and we feel into those barriers and consider how we might meet that person more fully. And this simple ritual, a simple act of naming and offering and feeling, really seems to open the door, and maybe an energetic doorway, preparing the inner ground, entering the field, becoming more present to meet the group, but also tuning into ourselves and each other and the bigger picture as we enter the transformative cauldron.
So if we strip this work down to protocols and outcomes, we risk forgetting what it truly is, which is a return to soul. It's a reweaving of the human spirit. It's a return to something ancient. And the co-therapy model for us is not an excess, it's an important container. Two nervous systems co-regulate in important ways when they're exposed to really wild work. When one therapist is activated, the other can anchor the field. Thank you. So two therapists are not about working more, they're about holding more between them. It's about having an adequate relational container for meeting the depth that this work opens us up to. And many of the people we work with carry deep attachment wounds. Witnessing two co-therapists in attuned collaboration models a secure relational framework. And this is not just about the harmony between the two therapists. This is about the two therapists sometimes modeling rupture and repair and offering something very safe and powerful in the space that some clients may have never had the opportunity to witness before. The relationship between the therapist becomes part of the medicine. The relationship between them is the main space holder. And two therapists will protect each other from their blind spots. They can co-witness and limit ethical drifts or boundary confusion and offer each other immediate support and peer supervision. So this is essential in high stakes, high vulnerability work. So when we do so, we don't just safeguard the client, we safeguard each other, we safeguard the therapist, and we safeguard the work itself. And holding these depths alone is can be fast-tracked to burnout. The co-therapy model can really manage the lone working impact of carrying more liability, more stress, and more risk of vicarious trauma. So therapists are humans, and they need to feel supported and mirrored in the space. It's more resource intensive, there's no doubt about that, but the cost of not having a second therapist sometimes can be far greater. This is not, we don't see two therapists as overstuffing, we see two therapists as essential for meeting the moment with the presence it demands. So as we look towards scaling, we wonder how can we maintain the responsibility of building a field of practice that's rooted in safety, depth, but also relational integrity. So in these moments, these unmistakable moments when the work is deep and the process is wild and the presence in the room is unwavering, the dyad itself becomes a vessel, an alchemical container. And it's a field of presence that doesn't just hold the trauma, it also holds the possibility. It's a place where rapture meets repair, grief can find a breath, and something long exiled can find its way home. So when the room becomes an altar of presence for soul to return, this is a moment that we need more than one set of hands. A set of hands should never carry such a process alone. Thank you very much for hearing us.